All right, y'all, we are back with Our Kind of People by Lawrence Graham. I am on chapter 4, Howard, Spelman, and Morehouse, the three colleges that count. No, that's the name of the title. I didn't just come up with that. I am an HBCU grad, but neither of those were my HBCU. So Lawrence goes on to talk about how black children of this time were trying to get used to choosing between going to an HBCU or a PWI after going through 12 years of only seeing a handful of black kids to possibly seeing an entire campus full of black kids, which is a culture shock. I have had friends who have never attended an HBCU. I am an HBCU graduate. I also attended a historically black high school. I also went to an all-black middle school. So it wasn't shocking for me to go to an HBCU, and it also wasn't shocking for me to be in a PWI for my master's. But for some people, transitioning to an HBCU can be shocking. Now, we can also talk about how in previous chapters of this book, we learned that proximity to whiteness was gold. So that is another issue. And just like in previous chapters, being a student at a HBCU that wasn't a part of the big three, the author goes on to tell us like it was an insult to say, oh, well, I'm going to one of those black schools, like I'm not good enough to go to a white school. And believe it or not, people still think this way. And he says, looking back, he regrets not being able to have those genuine bonds that are formed at HBCUs. Now, if you go to an HBCU, you know there's a very different experience. It is not without its own troubles. But I will say there is an experience like none other when you do walk on an HBCU campus and black is the norm. At the time, there are 117 HBCUs open, and only 3 of them, the big 3, allowed you to get into the black upper class. Howard, Morehouse, and Spelman were considered black people's Harvard, Princeton, and Yale. Ironically, he also talked about how Howard struggled, and also Spelman and Morehouse struggled with getting alumni contributions after they graduate. Now, if we think about it, these are the top wealthiest black schools in America. Why weren't they getting money? But they also have the same struggles as most other HBCUs, which is the majority of the black population will not have the same money as those going into PWIs. When Lawrence starts to talk about Spelman, he reveals something that I didn't know, which was Spelman was originally headed by white women. Because during that time in Atlanta, it was deemed that white people would give more money and funding to a school that was ran by white people. We see that today. Morehouse was founded by a former slave, and its original purpose was to bring education to recently freed slaves through the American Baptist Mission in 1867, which is a white-run organization. And although we know that Morehouse was attended by some prominent black leaders such as Dr. MLK, it was not separate from scandal. However, even though some of the big 3 had their issues, it seemed to not be big enough to say we're going to send our kids to other HBCUs. He goes on to talk about how schools like Fisk and Hampton University were not the big 3, but were also prominent HBCUs that were considered to be intellectually competitive amongst the black colleges. These 3 schools, these 3 big schools, were the only schools, and for the most part have remained the big 3 because they have been respected by people without color society. As someone who went to a small HBCU, I can tell you that I'm still grateful for my experience at an HBCU. It met the needs that I had. It was close enough to home but far enough away. And being someone who was a part of the SU system, I can tell you the pride is still the same. If you went to an HBCU, what was your experience like? Do you think Lawrence is correct in his observation of the big three? Do we still see the same type of challenges that HBCUs have faced in the past, which is funding? Or do we see that the big three are still the prominent ones getting all of the financial backing from celebrities and other organizations? I'd like to know your thoughts. Do you think he's accurate on his observation of the big three?